I'm the manager of East Devon Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, which is AONB, and it's that way round, which is a protected landscape, and it's in the southeast of Devon. My job is to oversee a small team to deliver a management plan on behalf of the local authorities in that patch, which for me is East Devon District Council and Devon County Council.
Yeah, and I'm Tim Youngs, I'm the Blackdown Hills AONB manager, and our two areas fit together perfectly, seamlessly, and yeah, where we've got an office up in Hemyock. So a slight difference for us is that we've got two Somerset council areas and two Devon council areas, so we've got 4 districts and 2 counties. An AONB is a nationally designated landscape. So they were designated at the same time as national parks in 1949. So they've actually got the same legal status, it's just that our purposes are a little bit different. Yeah. And there's 34 of us in England, 38 in England and Wales. Some are very large, so for example Cotswolds AONB is bigger than the Lake District National Park. Others are teeny tiny and quite small.
Isles of Scilly.
Yeah.
Very small, yeah. So they're nationally important, but they're managed and delivered and looked after locally with government funding, and they're special landscapes. They've got some very important areas within them that are important to protect and conserve, and that's what we do. They're there for everybody. They're national landscapes, but they're places, they're not like national parks in America where not many people live. These places are living and working landscapes. So the farmers use them because they live in them and they farm and they make a living out of them. But they've also got some stunning areas for people to visit and enjoy. Coastlines, hills, hill forts, rights of way, access land, heathland, all sorts of places really, haven't they?
Yeah, and I think as you enter an AONB, there's very limited signage, so it wouldn't be obvious that you're entering this particularly different area, but they are of high scenic value, they're rich in wildlife and heritage. And yeah, I think there's so many opportunities to get out there and explore them, and we produce a visitor guide and walks guides and cycling guides to help people. And what's interesting about our patch is that you've got, like your patch, we've got towns all the way around the outside, so we've got Taunton, Chard, Honiton, Axminster and Wellington. So you're really close to those centres of population.
Yeah, like most protected landscapes, they haven't got big built-up areas in them because that's why they're protected. They are nationally important landscapes and the populations are on the fringes. So providing access and opportunities for them is an important part of being able to enjoy them. Yeah.
Yeah, so in our AONB, the population inside the area is about 12,000. Something like that.
That's
so
very low. Yeah.
Quite small, really.
Yeah, I think we're about 16. But the population of, well, that's the size of one of the towns in our patch. I think Sidmouth's probably about 14,000. So they're very sparsely populated areas, largely farmed, agricultural, landscape.
I think the other thing is about the size of farms. So I think, like your area, probably got a lot of family farms.
Yes.
So it's some estates, it's lots of family farms that have run through generations of dairy, beef and sheep, etc. But it's a real mix, and that's what partly creates a patchwork of landscapes, I think, having those different farm types and different size of holding.
Last year at our national conference we launched the Colchester Declaration because we were in Colchester, and it was an opportunity to make a statement about how important nature is in our world, and it was timed at a time when the government was also looking at national parks and AONBs. So we made a very bold statement: if the government supported us with the resources and the equipment and the wherewithal to do it, we would try and achieve various targets and actions. And there's 3 key areas that we focused on. One was around nature conservation, the other was around climate change, and the third was around nature connectedness and engagement with people. So 3 really bold statements about what we wanted to achieve and some pledges about how we were going to do that. And it's set the ball rolling, hasn't it? In many ways.
Yeah. So one of the things we pledged to do was to produce a nature recovery plan for every AONB. So that's something we're working on.
This year?
This year, yeah. Working on quite closely.
Yes.
And what we're wrestling with at the moment, I think, is, or in a good way wrestling, is about how to fit in species and people into that mix as well. So it's about what does the ambition, future ambition for nature's recovery in our AONBs look like? How can we fit particular species into that mix in terms of as an indicator of the health of the landscape, and then how can we take people along on the journey? So that's quite a big task, isn't it, over the next 6 months?
Yeah, and one of the things that was identified in the government's review paper was that we probably weren't doing enough for the diversity of population that we've got. We weren't engaging enough people in the right way in nature and getting them out and about. And we needed to look at ways of doing that. And that's one of our challenges, isn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think in terms of climate resilience, we've got pledges such as planting 36,000 hectares of trees across all the AONBs, which is a pretty high target across England.
That's quite challenging in East Devon, because we've already got 18%, nearly 18% tree cover.
Yeah, we're on 15%.
Which is well above the national average.
Yeah. And then we've got other actions, haven't we, like securing carbon in soils, regenerating woodland and trying to achieve net zero targets. So, yeah, it's rising up the agenda rapidly. And then, in my area, in combination with that, we've got a climate change adaptation project running called Connecting the Colne. So it's in the Colne catchment, which is the northwestern part of our AONB.
The Colne's big river in Devon?
Well, it's a big number, 26,000 hectares, so it flows from the Blackdown Hills down to Exeter.
Okay, yeah.
So we're working with communities and farmers to help install nature-based solutions to improve resilience in catchments.
Right.
And then we talk about that at things like our East Devon Catchment Partnership meeting and share best practice and learn from each other, don't we? So that's our sort of big headline project at the moment.
And we've got a couple of other projects that we're doing with farmers and landowners to facilitate improvements in the farmed environment, which most people who drive around the countryside of Devon think it's a stunning place. There's nothing wrong with it. It looks green and lush. The cows are there because they were there last year. The sheep are. The trees might come down and go up, but otherwise it looks pretty good. But there's quite a challenge out there in that environment, isn't there, in terms of looking after that landscape and the impact of that. And that's...
Yeah, well, there's some quite big problems in the catchments, aren't there? So you've got towns getting flooded. Yeah. I think at the moment drought's a big issue, so yeah. And then water quality as well, so we've got a lot of work to do, really.
And our species stuff, we've been sort of tasked with identifying a species to get off the red list, the data list, the danger list, if you like. And we've, I think, committed to getting 30 off by 2030, nationally, all the AONBs. And that's been really interesting because we've found out a little bit more about what's special in our landscape and the things that need conserving. I don't know about you, but we've done some surveys, and some of the things that came up to the top of that were beavers, obvious one at the moment. Yeah. But the Heath potter wasp, you ever seen one of those?
No, I've heard of them.
Pretty impressive thing. That was very popular because it just looks so stunning, but a very difficult thing and very specialised habitat. But what species have you sort of...
So one we've got is interesting is the white-clawed crayfish. It's our native crayfish. Right. The last place in Devon is on the River Colne again. So we've been identifying where they're still remaining and where the invasive signal crayfish is moving in.
The signals, where are they from? Are they American? Or?
American, yeah, introduced in the 1970s for meat, and then they escaped from their ponds where they were introduced. So they're a big problem. And then we share a few as well, don't we? So the greater horseshoe bat,
yep,
and the Beckstein's bat, which uses woodlands. Yep. Brown hair streak butterfly.
Yeah, that's the same territory. Yeah, and I think we've got them in both our patches, haven't we?
And the last one perhaps is hazel dormouse. So and those last two I think are really good indicators of the health of the habitat, because if dormice and brown hairstreak can move around using hedges, woods and other features, then it just shows you how well connected the landscape is.
And that's important.
Yeah, and we're sort of bucking together, I think, bucking the trend nationally. So those species are declining elsewhere, but actually still doing okay here, which is really good.
And that's largely because we've got a landscape that's knitted together with a hedgerow system. And as you said before, very small family farms still maintaining some kind of living within this environment. And that's what's important to maintain, isn't it?
I think the other thing worth just talking about is the Nature Recovery Network. So there's a national project underway for a nature recovery network across the whole of England. And we're trying to key into that to make sure that our efforts locally mean that species can move freely across our own landscapes, but beyond as well. So they can, and it's also good, this is joining things up a bit, linking to climate resilience, because it means if you get particularly droughty seasons like at the moment, or hotter summers, warmer winters, it means that species can move to the climate space that suits them rather than getting stuck in one area and then they become locally extinct. So I think if we can apply that science in our landscapes, we'll be doing something right anyway.
Yeah, it's quite a long-term view that we've got to take, isn't it? Because these changes, although we've got a good fabric in a way within the landscapes, the quality of that fabric that we need to, it's like a heritage garment. It's kind of wearing thin in a couple of places, and we need to do a bit of work to keep that back up to the order that it needs to be in order to support wildlife.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
And I guess the challenge for us as well is blending in those other objectives. So you've got historic heritage, biodiversity, landscape.
Always a challenge.
And then I think we've got there almost, haven't we, on some projects where we knit all those together, and we've got benefits for water quality, people, biodiversity, which is exactly what we're trying to do on the Axe catchment at the moment, isn't it, around Axminster, etc.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing about AONB partnerships that are their strength, is they haven't got a particular angle around either biodiversity or heritage or landscape or, you know, we take an overarching view, and they all play an important part in how our landscape is managed and functions. We just need more resources. Yeah. That's all. Yeah. So we know that emotional connection to landscape is really important in terms of society. We know through the Landscapes for Life project that's been running through the National Association that individuals, children particularly, who engage with nature at a very early stage directly are much more likely to carry out a positive lifestyle behaviour in future years. It's something that becomes part of their psyche and how they operate. So every opportunity we can get to provide contact with nature, you know, as the Colchester Declaration talked about, at a very early stage has got to be, you know, important. It's got to be a priority for us, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, every year we try and get round all our primary schools just to do on a different theme every year. And
we've had projects in the past where we've used a different approach to engage people in the countryside through the medium of art. So we've got a long-distance footpath that goes through our AONB, the East Devon Way. It was deliberately created about 25, 26 years ago to explore the AONB, to go through all the different landscapes, and there's lots of different landscapes within the one area. But it was really promoted as a sort of hiker, you know, yomping route. And not many people went beyond a local walk, if you like, to explore the rest of the area and to see parts they wouldn't normally go to. So we used an arts-based programme to get people to some of those locations. The East Devon Way was a great example of how we work with the arts sector, with places like Thelma Holbrook Gallery here, to engage professionals who know about that subject and allow them to explore ways of engaging a range of people across our AONB in art and in nature. We've had some fantastic results through that. We had a wonderful display here a couple of years ago as part of our annual annual conference to show some of the art that's been created through that process. And just wonderful ways of getting people out in the countryside.
Yeah, we're trying to launch an Understanding the Landscapes project at the moment. So a couple of years ago we had an exhibition of Robert Bevan and the Camden Town artists. I don't know if you've heard of those. They were Impressionist painters from about 100 years ago. So Camden Town, because there were a group of London artists who came to the Blackdown Hills to paint in amazing colours what they could see in the landscape. And actually when you look at the landscape now compared to 100 years ago, some landscapes haven't really changed and others have, and there's a whole story in there to tell. And it really captures people's imagination, so we're very keen to go on to phase 2 of that project and maybe have a few painting workshops and things like that.
Yeah, we did that with some of the early work around just rediscovering the Peter Orlando Hutchinson project, which was done with the Arts Gallery here, Thelma Hulbert, and took people to places where the artist Hutchinson had been and drawn the landscape, and he was a very real drawer. You know, they weren't impressionist drawings; they were quite factual. He was a very detailed man, so you could almost rely on those as almost photographic quality art. And then the children went back and drew those landscapes themselves, and then compared them to those. And there is very little change actually in that landscape to look at. We have access to people who know the sector really well, understand art. I love art, but I don't really understand art. But also understand how flexible and adaptable it can be in its deployment as a mechanism for engaging people. So the Thelma Hulbert Gallery has given us access to a different way of working and a different way of engaging that I don't think we'd have been able to achieve ourselves.
So we're really pleased this year to be working with Thelma Hulbert Gallery and yourselves on the Creative Cabin project. And we see that as having huge potential to get out to round communities and to engage people with art and linking back to the Colchester Declaration. So yeah, we're really excited about that. And hopefully that'll mushroom into other bigger projects as well.
Hopefully, yeah. And the function that it provides is fantastic. And I think, yeah, there's an awful lot of miles in it potentially for future work. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I really like the look of it, and I think, yeah, children or anybody of any age actually will find it really appealing. And I was just thinking of some of the places we're hoping it's going to go, and I could see it working really well. So
yeah, no, fantastic, and it can go pretty much anywhere, I think, really. Yeah. Down the narrow country lanes.
Yeah, I think taking art and nature on tour is really important at the moment because a lot of people have been locked down, some more than others, and I think communities, rather than expect communities to come to towns or certain places, to take it to them. And also a lot of people have been discovering nature, haven't they? Maybe even for the first time. So I think
a lot of people have been getting out.
Helping them develop that interest is really important.
I think it's awoken that in a lot of people, and there's an opportunity to build on that with this kind of thing, really, to get out and about. And it's been an important sanctuary for a lot of people, hasn't it? Wildlife in the countryside. You know, having been locked down in buildings for so long, you realise how important it is when you get out and you spend a bit of time in the countryside. It's so important for your mind and for your soul, and to understand that and appreciate that relationship. So
it's about expressing yourself however you want to through art, which I think is a great way in, isn't it?
Yeah.